Jeff Hurley, Acting Director for IC4 at the Marine Corps. Welcome. Great to see you again. We talked on the panel at AFCEA DC a couple of weeks ago about how you're syncing up rationalization, system modernization, application rationalization, and modernization efforts in the Corps. Tell me where you are on that journey and where you're headed on that journey, Jeff.
So, good morning, or good afternoon, by the way. We're well on that journey. Starting with McSen unification. So the Marine Corps network, we're trying to unify it from flagpole to fighting hole, is the way we term it. Modernizing the entire network so we have cyber visibility from all the way from our home bases all the way to the bitter end of the network. Mm-hmm. Our ability to see that from a cyber perspective is invaluable and can't be replaced. We do have some modernization issues, however, right? We're dealing with older technology, things that just need to be kind of blown up and rebuilt in a modern way with cyber built in from the ground up. And as we continue on our journey, we'll improve those along the way.
Mm-hmm. The things that you're blowing up and rebuilding, what are you doing in the meantime? Because I imagine those are systems that you need for operations in the interim.
So the answer to that question is different per system. Some systems we're going to absorb risk and say we can live without those for the period of time it takes us to rebuild those. Others we're building building them and keeping the old systems online until the new ones are ready. Mm-hmm. And then we make a seamless transition at that point. Uh-huh. Where we can, though, we accept the risk. From a cost perspective, maintaining two systems is never a good idea. But from a risk perspective, from an effectiveness perspective, from a Marine Corps' capability perspective, sometimes that is necessary.
What are the components in the risk management framework that you're using to assess that?
So it's interesting you bring up RMF. I'm going to shift that question a little bit because RMF is changing. DoD CIO is dictated that we're going to blow up RMF. Now, what that exactly means, we're not entirely sure yet. From a Dawn perspective, Jane Rathbun is pushing cyber ready, which is something the Marine Corps is on board with as well, which essentially means we're going to take a system and we're going to look at its baseline. Once we understand its baseline and where it is from a cyber perspective, we can throw it out in the wild, provide some active monitoring on that, and if that baseline changes, we know there's a problem when we attack it. So I think that's probably a better answer than trying to go through which steps of the RMF we're looking at. RMF is way too rigid at this point. It's way too much checklist driven, and it is just not operational enough to be effective.
How do you get to a place where it is more dynamic then and not so static?
So time. The transition is going to take time. Everybody says we need to run fast. We do. We need to go run fast. But, slow is fast and fast is smooth. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So we just need to take our time, do it right, make sure that the things that we're implementing are valid and valuable and useful to the Corps.
One of the things that I took away from our conversation a couple of weeks ago on that panel, Jeff, is that the Corps is now on board with the idea that their modernization effort is not going to end, that it's something that will be a continuous iteration moving forward. How has that impacted the way that you're able to think, because other people are on board with that idea, about how you're going to proceed?
Well, it's opportunity. A lot of change going on in government right now, as you're intimately aware, and I look at that as absolutely opportunity. I've spent, in my 23 years active duty Navy time and a significant time as a civilian before taking this position, I've heard a lot of people gripe about how systems work and how bad things are. Well, guess what? We've now been given a carte blanche to go out and blow all that up and figure out exactly what we want to be when we grow up. Mm-hmm. How do we make those changes that we really believe need to happen? And the Marine Corps is going after those things, and we're making some of those changes, but we're not making them for tomorrow. We're making them for next year. Mm-hmm. We're trying to look far enough into the future that the changes we make won't have to be modernized again next week. Mm-hmm. And when they are modernized, they'll be simpler to modernize because they're built on a foundation that accepts that.
Mm-hmm. How much of what you have right now, how much of what you're working on is what you would call legacy, and how much of is what you would call modernized or okay for now?
Wow, that's a tricky question. I would say, from a tactical perspective, from those tactical systems, I think a lot of those are modernized. We're probably, 60-40. From a business system perspective, that's different, right? I think a lot of the business systems that the Marine Corps works with right now are legacy systems. Mm-hmm. And they are systems that have been built without cybersecurity built in from the ground up. So those are the ones I think we need to focus on, and I think we need to have things like ISSMs built into the planning process as these things are built, so that cybersecurity is built in from scratch. and they don't have to be bolted on as a secondary thought later on.
The security concept that everybody's talking about is zero trust here. And it strikes me that that is, I imagine, the focus in the core as well, that those two terms have become synonymous. Is that a fair read on my part?
I think that's fair read. I think, and zero trust is absolutely the baseline for everything we're doing from a security perspective. I will caveat that with, there's a pillar in zero trust called data. Data pillar, I am extremely concerned about with where we are as the DoD, as a government for that matter, because I don't think we have a baseline of how we label data, how metadata looks. And all of that is really integral on when you're trying to implement an AI solution or automate systems. Case in point, if I order a tank from the Army and I order a tank from the Navy, those are two entirely different items, right? So understanding and having a system that understands the difference between those things is very important.
Jeff, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, sir, very much.